went to law school and I was working on Wall Street for 2 years, and Julia was working for a fledgling new company called First Artist, and she met and became friends with Tony Bill. Tony had a vision, and he was telling us that there are all these individuals coming out of film school and nobody will read their scripts or take them seriously. And one of the things that he came across was an idea for a movie about con men by a USC film student, David Ward. Well, of course, this was The Sting, and we decided to pool all our money and try to do this ourselves. When we arrived in Hollywood, the door had opened a crack, possibly because of Easy Rider. Hollywood in the 60s had been struggling, and the conclusion was maybe we should step back a bit and let some of these young kids take a shot with what they like. Brian De Palma lived next door to Julia and I we lived north of Malibu in a place called Trancas, and he was living with Margot Kidder, and at one point he said to me, there was a journalist who was doing a story on him who had written a script. This was Paul Schrader, and he didn't like it for himself, but he thought it would appeal to me. So he gave me the script, and I instantly fell in love with it.
I don't believe that one should devote his life to morbid self-attention. I believe that someone should become a person like other people.
And this was, I guess, the summer of '73, when I read the script and really loved it and wanted to get involved, and brought it to my partners and paid Paul the sum of $1,000 for an option. There were aspects to it, being into the soul of a man in pain and glimpsing through his diary the mechanism through which, how he sees life and how he arrives at his decisions was fascinating. And also what I love was and we had to fight to keep this, the idea at the end that the difference between a hero and a monster is such a fine line that it's whoever happens to be interpreting, whoever's the first one to say this is what happened, defines it.
June 8th. My life has taken another turn again. The days move along with regularity, over and over. One day indistinguishable from the next. A long, continuous chain. And suddenly, there is a change.
Problem was that it wasn't The Sting. The Sting was a classic Hollywood movie, but it certainly wasn't disturbing like Taxi Driver. And when we took it out to try to put it together, every studio, we'd walk in the door and they'd say, "What do you got?" And we were greeted with a lot of negative response.
I hope this card finds you all well as it does me. I hope no one has died. Don't worry about me. One day there'll be a knock on the door and it'll be me.
One day, Paul Schrader said, "You have to see this movie, Mean Streets. There's a rough cut screening next week. I can get you in." We went to the screening, and I remember midway through, I was sold. And, talked to Julia and said, not only do we want this director, but we want that actor.
We saw this cut of Mean Streets, and I remember talking to Julia saying, boy, it should be, Travis Bickle, that's really De Niro. It really is De Niro. It should be Bobby.
So after the screening was over, we said to Marty, we wanted to offer this project to the two of them tied together. And they both liked it. They both wanted to do it. Still, it was difficult.
We all had to have a measure of success before it could get financed. And we all did. All four of us had a success.
Fortunately, it all worked in our benefit because every time we would lose them, they'd go off and do something wonderful. Marty did Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Bobby ended up doing The Godfather 2 and winning an Oscar. I see Taxi Driver as something that became a bargain. David Begelman was the head of the studio, and I'm really grateful that he financed the film. At some level, as a businessman, he thought, getting this guy won an Academy Award and a talented director, and really it just ripened. It's like a piece of fruit. It got, at one point, it got to be attractive.
Wait a second, I want to talk to you. Don't just go. Wait a second.
We couldn't offer them a start date, so we didn't want to lose Marty for a year because a lot can happen, all of it bad, if you wait a year. Marty had to delay again because he was going to do a project with Marlon Brando about Indians. This was a traumatic time for the Taxi Driver team, and he was ducking me, and I was chasing him around town, leaving notes on his car, trying to guilt trip him into not doing the Indian movie. Everybody got available, the budget was right, and we were in a little bit of a honeymoon with Columbia because we had just brought them Close Encounters, which they were in competition with another studio, and we gave it to them. So just on that day, everything lit green, and we got a yes from Columbia.
I got some bad ideas in my head. Take your hand off, okay? Then just leave. Take it off.
It was my baby. I had to fight for it and be with it every step of the way. It was my role in our partnership to be the on-set producer. It was not a favored picture at Columbia. There was just tremendous amount of heat, and I'm glad we were shooting in New York because that 3,000 miles kind of saved us from too much intervention. I do whatever I can do to help the director make the best film he's capable of. In this case with Marty, there were no surprises because all through preparation, we knew what the approach was going to be in every sequence. You know, for instance, the gun salesman, Steve Prince, a friend of Marty's. This is a case where Marty allowed the actor to do a lot of improvisation.
There you go. It's a premium high resale weapon.
He wasn't an actor. I was nervous.
Look at that.
You know, he was a friend of the director's and didn't have a lot in the way of screen credits, and had to hold his own in a one-on-one scene with Bobby.
$350 for the Magnum, $250 for the .38.
But Marty knew something about Stephen Prince and what he could get out of him, and he knew that it would be an unpredictable, surprising performance.
How about dope? Grass, hash, coke, mescaline, downers, nebutyl, tunol, chloral hydrates.
It's more than I had hoped it would be. I loved the script, but Marty brought another layer to it that only he could bring. And I love the fact that people still to this day, 30 years later, talk about it, are influenced by it, single it out as a film, one of their favorites. And I hope that it inspires filmmakers to break new boundaries and go for something that is not a formula. It violates a lot of traditional rules of screenwriting and movie making. But I think that if you work with your heart, as opposed to a little bit from your head to stay on track, but if primary impulse is coming from your heart, you have a chance of creating something that people really feel, will be affected by.